ground, don't get caught in the mosh pit. Fuel to the fire, ain't nobody can stop it. Trouble in my city, but you know I'm across it. Got a 40 on my hip and I'm liable to spark it. Throw down these hits, my click is indivisible. I aim, you duck, I squeeze, now you invisible. I'm not afraid of getting physical. All these different chemicals are fogging up my visuals. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Yo, we notorious, we ain't no runners. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Yo, we some warriors, they ain't called gunners. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Put on my sweat, put on my beat, put on the map, put on my team. Take out every motherfucker in between, know what I mean? Better myself, better my aim, better my rap, better my name. Killing rappers on my hang, I'm by their chains for the fame. Never thought I would, and now I'm running. You don't wanna follow me, I'm out the fucking front.
What's going on? What's going on? Welcome to another broadcast of Steve the Kidney Nurse. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to be talking about African Americans, the least race to receive a living kidney donation. And this has been like this for a very long time. It's something that you don't hear about unless you read it. There are plenty articles and studies done on why this is going on. Okay. Now I want to shout out to TikTok crew who's watching me live on TikTok. Have no one watching on YouTube or Facebook, but it's all good because they can come back and see the replay. So it's shocking. It's shocking that you see a lot of warriors. You see them today. You see them on Facebook. You see them on TikTok. You see them all across social media advertising for a living kidney donor. Okay. Now, 10, 15 years ago, when the internet wasn't like this, you didn't hardly see people advocating or talking about fighting the kidney donor. It was something, I guess, done behind the scenes. Or you registered somewhere, you went to one of these big organizations and they showed you how to get on the registry. I'm not sure how long a lot of these organizations now that you can go to, like Match.com or I may be saying that wrong, but Match.com and these other transplant websites that you pay a subscription to be on this list or pool where they can find or match you up with a living donor. Now, it hasn't always been like that. Now, why is it like that? Why is it like that where you got people like the Brown brothers, all right, Jeffrey and Jared. Jeffrey over in Abu Dhabi, his wife had kidney failure. She was on dialysis for a while. He was advocating trying to find her a donor. He preferred a living donor, but I think she got a cadaver. I'm not sure. And a cadaver is someone who has passed away. Now, Jared started advocating for his sister-in-law when he saw her plea on Facebook. Now, why do people continue to advocate and now you see an explosion of people looking for donors? That's because there is not enough people in the donor pool to donate. I mean, if you look at it, if you put in these shoes, you have to imagine how hard it may or may not be for someone to ask their relative, someone to approach their brother, their sister. I mean, just think of the mental challenge behind that of asking another human being for a piece of their body or their organ so they can live, okay? We all hear these stories. You hear the stories of people getting a transplant, people congratulating them. They're walking out the hospital. News flashes and on the billboard, people looking at news stories. That's the great side of transplant. But we don't hear the dark side of it. We do not hear the dark side of transplant. We got people on TikTok waiting 4 years, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20. I know people waiting 15 years. And you say, wait a minute. Why is it this person waited 10, 5, 4 years and someone just starts dialysis and boom, they got called for a kidney? I think this show is needed to talk about, because the more you know, especially if you have kidney disease and you see yourself going down to stage 5, you can start your plea more earlier. Okay? You can start your plea for a living donor, because that's the best, they say. Research and studies say a living donor is the best option for transplant than a deceased donor. Let's see what the National Kidney Foundation says about African Americans least likely to receive a living kidney donation. Even though this article was written May 30th, 2012, it still applies today. Let's make no mistakes. There's still a disparity. As you can see in this article, in my TikTok background, this article, I can't see the first part, but it's 2018. And this article is 2012 that I'm about to read some of. Okay? It says, and I quote, "At every transplant center in the nation, African Americans are the least likely to receive a kidney from a living organ donor, according to findings published in the June issue of the American Journal of Kidney Diseases for the official journey of the National Kidney Foundation." It says the study, based on data gathered from all 275 transplant centers in the U.S., also showed that those facilities serving predominantly, and let me underscore that, predominantly African American populations had even higher rates of living donor transplant disparities. According to Dory Segve, MD of Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, he says, and I quote, "We were quite disappointed to find that not a single center in this country had equal attainment of live donor kidney transplants in African Americans and non-African Americans." So that tells you, without a doubt, that all 275 transplants in the U.S. show that while serving predominantly African American populations, had even a higher rate of living donor transplant disparities, meaning they're not advocating for the African American community to get a living donor. And it kind of starts with your doctor. It starts with that nephrology. When you go in, does the nephrologist even mention transplant to you? When you was in the hospital and you got diagnosed, when that nephrologist came on that consult, when you got diagnosed for kidney failure, something you may not have known about, when the doctor came in that room to do that consult, did he once mention, let's try to look for a kidney donor for you? Do you know somebody? No, it's where do you live? I have a center that I can send you to. And now the patient is off to hemodialysis and know nothing about a transplant. If you just got diagnosed with kidney failure, you knew nothing about kidney disease, you're not thinking about a transplant. You're trying to get well. Is your kidneys going to come back to life? That's what you're thinking about. You're worrying about getting better. The last thing somebody's thinking about, unless they're educated and they've been pre-forewarned, they've been educated, the last thing you're thinking about is finding a kidney donor. Shit, you still trying to get past this. You still trying to get past this in your neck. Who was thinking about a kidney donor? So let's go on and see what the article says. It also says, at transplant centers with the highest disparities pertaining to living organ donation, African Americans had 76% lower odds. 76% lower odds of obtaining a kidney from a living donor. So the odds are already stacked against you going on most of these transplant lists. That's why you got to be your own advocate. That's why you got people like Jonathan Traylor, Jared Brown of the Warriors Quest, Jeffrey Brown, Kidney Solutions, and other ones, Transplant with Nashonda. There's other people that are trying to move the stick in raising awareness of organ donation, especially in people of color community. Let's not sugarcoat it. We know, okay? We all adults here. We may not want to talk about it, but you know inside that African Americans, Black, however you want to call it, people of color, all across the board, there's a disparity with the housing market, with finances, with businesses, with health, with everything. So don't be surprised when it comes to this. Before the Medicare Act, okay, now I may get the dates wrong. It may be 73 or 76 when Richard Nixon signed the Medicare Act. Before that, there was the God Committee, Seattle Hospital. They didn't have enough machines, but they had a lot of people starting to get kidney failure, but not enough machine. Now they got a committee of the people in the community, a doctor, a banker, a housewife, a preacher, government worker, a couple of other people, right? Now they have to decide who's going to get this kid. I mean, who's going to go on dialysis? Who's going to go on dialysis based on what? What are you basing it on now? What they based it on back then? Income. Were you making $30,000? What was your standing in the community? What was you worth? your spiritual value? What was your worth? That's what it came down to. And the bottom line, if you were probably black and you had kidney failure, we all know back then, blacks' health, and still today, let's make no mistake, it is what it is. Once we accept that, we can move on to change that. But let's make no mistake. When you're in the hospital, blacks are treated much different than whites. Maybe not in all cases, but in the general consensus, it's the way it is. Again, that's why you have to be your own health advocate. Okay, so let's move on and see what else they say. They say the study based on data gathered. Let me see. Oh, here we go. It says at transplant centers with the highest disparities pertaining to living organ donation, African Americans had 76% lower odds of obtaining a kidney from a living donor. Even at the facilities that came closest to equality, African Americans were still 35% less likely to obtain a transplant from a living donor. Now, this is from research that's published on kidney.org from the National Kidney Foundation. They go on to say there are more than, and I quote, there are more than 92,000 people waiting for a kidney in the United States, and over a third of those are African Americans, and over a third of those waiting for a kidney are African Americans. In 2011, there were and these numbers are higher. In 2011, there were 5,771 living donor transplants performed. 5,000, you still, even if you subtracted that still leaves about 80-something thousand people. Donor performed the lowest rate in 10 years. But only 813 of those kidneys were received by African Americans. Now, let's put this in perspective. In 2011, there were 5,000, I repeat, 5,771 living donor transplants performed. The lowest rate in 10 years. But only 800, didn't even pass 1,000. But only 813 of those kidneys were received by African Americans. As again, this was 2011. The numbers are probably a little higher, but not that much higher. Okay? And so Dr. Segev stated that the disparities could be explained, at least in part, by the epidemics of obesity, okay, hypertension, and diabetes, which are likely ruling out many potential African American organ donors from giving to a friend or family member. Differences in culture. See what I'm saying? You're not going to see like a Chinese person or Asian person, like unless they like friends that grew up in the same household and they, thicker than blood. But you're not going to see a Spanish guy, oh, I want to donate to this African American. It's not likely. It may have, I'm not saying it never happened, but that's not the average, okay? So he goes on to say that the disparities could be explained, at least in part, by the epidemics of obesity, hypertension, and diabetes, which are likely ruling out many potential African American organ donors from giving to a friend or family member. Now, differences in culture, education, and social attitudes, as well as barriers to medical care in general, may be also factors. Then he goes on to say, we need to figure out the keys to successfully reducing disparities. What is it that centers do to help their patients identify living donors? Okay, if you're on the transplant list, what is your, especially if you're African American, you can be Caucasian as well, but if you're on the transplant list, what is your transplant center doing to encourage or living organ donation for you? They may even be overwhelmed themselves, short of staff. Okay. How do they get live donors evaluated efficiently? How does that look like? And how do their patients address the many barriers to successful live donor transplantation, particularly those faced by African Americans? Come on, give me some comment. I don't have any comment. I got one person watching on the feed from Facebook, the Figo Initiative, and YouTube. But what is TikTok saying? Hey, Lady Coco, peace and blessings to you. Uninsured, underinsured, limited access to care. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for commenting, Lady Coco. Jared Brown, my brother from another mother, commented, and host of the Warriors Quest show. He says the other thing that's wrong is how the GFR is measured differently. Right, it's measured higher for African Americans and lower for whites. Thus, if they're going by a different GFR, and the GFR for me says I'm still at 60 or 40%, but in all actuality, I'm much lower than that. And then the other scale, which my counterpart, Caucasian, they get it, and they get a accurate indication of their GFR. You see how that goes? Thus, leaving African Americans waiting in lingo. Again, that's why I always said, and a lot of people may not agree with me on this, but if you can send money for wars, all the money we spent on wars, Afghanistan, Iran, Kuwait, Beirut, all these wars, Ukraine, we pay these contractors, these military contractors, billions, right? While we got people over here freaking homeless. All right. Now, if you took $5 million ain't crap. $5 million ain't $5 million isn't nothing. Okay. Now, if you take $5 million and you had an overseer and you paid someone between $250,000 to $300,000 voluntarily, of course, to donate. Okay, you go to the center. You don't know who you're donating to. All you're doing is first you're going to get your blood drawn, okay, to see and get checked up just like you would do regularly to see if you qualify. Once you pass that screening, you draw your blood and see what's going on with it. If you a match with your blood type. Now, everything good, your blood type, they throw it in the data bank, right? And let the computer match it up. And the recipient, you sign up. It could be a lottery, or it could just be how long you've been waiting, right? To see who qualifies. How long you've been waiting. If you've been waiting longer or the most needs, right? You get it. You sign up. You do your checkup to see if you're okay to get it. If you are, they put your blood in the data bank. And they say, no, beep, beep. They match you up. They put the person, you don't even meet the person. It ain't no you write a letter or any of that. Because this is money involved, right? This is money involved. And I'll be honest with you. You got a lot of people who've gotten a transplant and they ain't give a damn about writing a donor, right? Or the family of the person deceased. They got the kidney, they got the bag, and they gone. And I know a lot of, African Americans who've done their whites. It doesn't matter. People are people. But then you got some people who write the donor's family and want to meet them. Those are exceptional. But in this, the person goes, they extract the kidney, they take it out, and they had the other person in the other waiting for their organ. Boom, boom, the person recovers. Once they recover, the check is deposited in their account. Cha-ching! $250,000, $300,000. You recuperate at home. You got money for your bills. You got money to take a vacation. You got stuff to do because you never know what the future holds for you once you donate. What in case some cancer or something come out of the blue 5 years later and knock out the other kidney? Then what? It ain't no going to the top of the list, right? It's you wait in line because now you got to be cancer free. You got to wait 2 years or possibly more to be cancer free to get a transplant. So if by chance they didn't discover a cancer on checkup, but now 5 years later, you living your best life, a donor, and next thing you know, you go for some blood work and they find a cancer in the kidney. Now what? It ain't no, oh, I'm going to the top of the list. Shit. You know what? That next transplant, you better be calling me. No, it's none of that. Let's just make that clear. All right? You got to get rid of the cancer. Now you got to go on dialysis because you got to get treatment. Now you wait the 2 years to be cancer free. Now, at the end of that, do you go to the top? I know people who donated that didn't go to the top. I don't know how that works. I just know from their experience that they didn't go to the top and get the transplant. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I know individuals that it didn't happen to. So if you pay somebody $250,000, $300,000, and I put money aside and years down the line, I get cancer in my other kidney, I got something stacked away. It ain't going to be no poor me, poor me. I'm asking for prayers and this and that because now where's everybody else at when you gave the organ and you getting praises? Oh man, that was great, da da da. And then the next thing you know, you posting that you got kidney cancer and you got to get the other one removed. Next thing you know, oh, prayers. God bless you, prayers. But that's it. Ain't nobody coming to your house to help you with your finances, to help you do this or get you through mentally. They may say, oh, you can reach out and talk to me. But what about when you do reach out to people and you call and shit and nobody's picking up? Then what? That's what I'm talking about. Where are these people when in your time of need? So this is something to think about. Also, talking to other, if you got friends in other cultures, having that conversation with them. So how do, if you're on the transplant list, anyone, I don't care who you are or where at, what are they doing to help their patients identify living donors? How do they get live donors evaluated efficiency, get them through that bureaucracy? How do they get, and how do their patients address the many barriers to successful live donor, particularly those faced by African Americans? So according to Joseph Vasilati, MD, the National Kidney Foundation's chief medical officer, he says, and I quote, there are several takeaway messages from the study they did about the disparities in, these hospitals, these 275 hospitals. He said, some of these takeaways: first, we must make an effort to increase living donation for everyone who is eligible for kidney transplantation. And then he goes on, and I quote, second, we have to explore different ways to reduce racial disparities in access to living donor kidney transplantation. Let me repeat that. Second, we have to explore. We got to do more than explore, guys. Okay, we got to do shows like this. We just got to have this conversation. We just can't brush it to the side. Excuse me. We just can't brush it to the side and act like it's not happening or it don't exist, right? Excuse me. Damn, this is live, but I got this mosquito flying around. You never know what they may be carrying. But you got to explore different ways to reduce racial disparities in access to living donor kidney transplantation. We gotta find ways to sound the alarm, do more screening, do more testing, talk about it because we know that there are health disparities in the Black community. So how do you find other African Americans, not just Caucasians and other race, but other African Americans who, may qualify to be living donors and can look at the bigger picture of organ donation? He say, third, we need to find ways to amplify. We gotta yell it to the mountaintop. Collaborative interactions between patients and transplant centers to find potential living donors. Again, we need to find ways that amplify collaborative interactions between patients and transplant centers to find potential living donors. I mean, these hospitals are probably overrun. Probably your transplant coordinator is probably stretched to the bones. And finally, we have to address why there is such variation between transplant centers in the U.S. So why is it? Why can't everything be across the board at each center? As you've seen, some places, they want you to have a BMI of this. Another place wants you to have a BMI of that. One place wants you to have a stack of money. Other place, they don't care if you got a stack of money. One place, they want you to do this. One this. Why can't it be universal across the board? Okay, universal criteria. But like I said, if they pay someone $250,000 to $300,000, I guarantee you'll be people coming out of the woodwork to want to donate. You got to have some type of incentive now. This is the 21st century. You got people who are selfish. They got bills. They got to pay this. They got to pay that. So why not help a life to save a life? And nobody better not take their slogan. I want to copyright that. Help a life to save a life. Okay? Somebody could need help, financial help. All the homeless people you have on the streets. A lot of them not by their fault. Okay? Do you know what $300,000 would do for someone? Get them back on their feet? Especially if they was healthy, free of diseases and all that. They were just homeless. And they had the perfect match. Okay? So we got to figure out, why is there variations between the transplant centers across the country? Each one has their own criteria. And unfortunately, where you may be living, maybe Georgia, California, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, Baltimore, D.C., Philly. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Okay? Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee. Let's get it universal, guys. And Vassetti also goes on to say the study showed that transplant centers with the highest rates of living organ donor transplants also had the lowest racial disparity, which indicates that increasing the living donor pool will benefit all transplant candidates, especially African Americans, and potentially reduce racial disparity. Now, let me repeat that. He says this study showed that transplant centers with the highest rates of living organ donor transplants also had the lowest racial disparity, which indicates that increasing the living donor pool will benefit all transplant candidates, especially African Americans, and potentially reduce racial disparity. So you could be watching this right now, right? You could be African American, and you could be like, Well, that didn't happen to me. I got a living donor transplant just like that. Or, and maybe you could have been at one of those hospitals that had high rates of living donor and you benefited from that. But what about the hospitals that don't have a high rate of living donor transplant and the majority of their list consists of African Americans? Now what? Now what? Again, the nephrologist is not talking about transplants when you get hit with kidney failure. They want to put you on dialysis. You may have some, not saying all, but you may have some that mention it to you. But right now, you might even be thinking about it. You just want to get well. That's carrot and ginger juice. But guys, let me see you comment. But, this is a big problem in the U.S. But getting off topic for a moment, you wouldn't believe. Now I'm going to do a show on this because I'm so ecstatic. You wouldn't believe I had my blood work done on Wednesday. Went to LabCorp because many of you may know, in June, I went to the doctor, my nephrologist that I've been seeing for about 20 years or more, when I first found out I had kidney issues from this unknown viral infection. My GFR was, like last year, was greater than 99. And then when I went for the test, get my blood work drawn, it was 80. And my cholesterol was like 268. It was crazy. All my numbers, like a lot of my numbers was off the charts. And I knew what I did wrong. I was eating late at night, eating fried, chicken, Chinese food, wings, hamburgers. I was doing all the things that I preach against. All right. And I'm human. And we all subject to fall. Okay. But I got up. And as y'all saw my kidney wellness journey, and I'm still on it, okay, I reduce my sodium intake. I eat 1 meal a day. And I don't recommend you do it. Check with your doctor. But this is what I've done. Eat 1 meal a day. Reduce my cholesterol intake. What I eat. Y'all seen the smoothies that I prepared and the food that I made. Grilled fish, onions, bell peppers, mushrooms, asparagus. You saw my exercise. You see me walking every day. In fact, once I get off here, I'm going to walk because I didn't walk earlier, but I'm going to walk tonight before I go to bed, 2 miles. And so I've done all that, and I'm here to say, and I even used Renadil. I showed you guys, you see it in my videos on TikTok. I did that faithfully and took a statin medicine, vastatin medicine, to lower the cholesterol. But I'm here and have a report. When I called, I want to download and show you guys one day this week. I see what day I'm off. My GFR is 87. It went from 80 to 87. You hear me? From 80, it climbed back up to 87. And where that puts me, okay, okay, I'm still at stage 2, Because stage 2 is from 60% to 89%. So, but it depends on what scale you're looking at. I got to look at the lab work and see which one they basing it off of. But 87%, it's trending back up. Okay? It's trending back up. So that tells me what I'm doing something right. Okay? Now I'm going to show you this. And everything was good. My cholesterol is back in range. My triglycerides, saturated fat, the LDL, everything is back to normal. Back to normal. That's how you reduce kidney disease. I didn't go and seek some tea and drink that all the time and not do the other things. No, I'm not putting no tea in my body that I know nothing about. No herbal supplements. Okay? That's just me. I'm not telling you not to do it, but if you do it, make sure you do your research thoroughly. Very thoroughly. Now, there are some herbs out there that help, and it's good for the kidneys, all right? But right now, I'm just not in that direction right now. So, I'm telling you, it's crazy, but the Renadil, the change of diet, the change of lifestyle, again, my GFR went up from 80 to 87. That's 7 points. 7 points, and it's only been 3 months. June, well, wait a minute, for June, July, August, September. So 5 months. I go back and see the doctor in December. So what am I saying here? If you got kidney disease stage 1, 2, and 3, even 4 or 5, you can stop or halt the progression. If you have 5, it may be a little too late depending on where you're at. But I've seen people at stage 5 stay off dialysis for years. For years. So I've proven that with the change of diet, okay, with the change of diet, lifestyle, and the use of a supplement that helps promote kidney health, I was able to increase my GFR from 80 to 87. Now, John Hopkins, just share a little bit of an article that John Hopkins says. John Hopkins says, despite efforts, this was an article, this is the article you see right here, 1/23/2018. It says, despite efforts over the past 2 decades, that's 20 years, to increase the number of Black and Hispanic patients receiving kidney transplants from related or unrelated living donors, these racial ethnic minority patients are still much less likely to undergo such transplants than white patients, John Hopkins researchers report. In fact, the investigators say the disparities have worsened. They worsened in the last 20 years. So if you're African American, you're watching, you got kidney failure, and you're on a transplant list, and you've been on there maybe 3-4 years now just waiting, Still have hope, but just know you're going to probably have more chances of getting a cadaver donor than a living if you don't promote yourself or find somebody, because the transplant center is damn sure not going to go out and find somebody for you. That's why they, in the other article, what is your transplant center doing to increase living donor transplants? Are they just sitting back, the surgeon, waiting for people to come in? It says the findings published January 2nd in the Journal of American Medical Associations are based on a study of 453,162 adult first-time kidney transplant candidates nationwide. Overall, the incidence of live donor kidney transplantation increased from 1995 to 2014. Among white patients from 7% to 11.4%, and among Asian patients from 5.1% to 5.6%, but decreased over the same time period among Black patients from 3.4% to 2.9%. And Hispanic patient from 6.8% to 5.9%. So as you can see, the overall incidence of live donor kidney transplant increased from 95 to 214 among white patients and Asian patients, but decreased for Black and Hispanic. You see the disparity? So, according to Tanjala Purnell, PhD, I quote, best case scenario, we would have thought that policies designated to increase live kidney donation would have helped narrow disparities. Now, she's a assistant professor of surgery at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Then she's going to say, worst case, we would think that these population level policies would not have an impact on disparities, but it is disappointing and surprising to find that the disparities have actually gotten much worse over the last 2 decades. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're going to say between 95 and 99, after adjusting for such demographic factors as age and gender, Black and Asian patients were about half as likely as white patients, and Hispanic patients about 80% as likely as white patients to receive a live donor kidney. Between 2010 and 2014, Black patients were about a quarter as likely as white patients to receive a live kidney donor, while Hispanic patients were about half as likely and Asians were about 40% as likely. This doctor, she's going to say that dozens of educational programs designed to address racial and ethnic disparities in live donor kidney transplantations were implemented within transplant centers or dialysis centers over the time they did the study, focusing on increasing awareness of the benefits of transplantation and live donations and addressing concerns such as financial costs and potential clinical risks for kidney transplant patients and living donors. Now they're saying that in addition, nearly, not all, but nearly all states now have some laws that provide economic support for donors, ranging from paid or unpaid leave from work to tax benefits. then they go on to say, while the study did not specifically explore reasons why live donor transplant disparities have increased for minorities, diseases that would often make people ineligible to become a live donor, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and kidney disease, present a higher burden now than 20 years ago and disproportionately affect Blacks and Hispanic populations. Delays in the receipt of kidney care owing in part to cost and lack of access to specialists among these populations may also contribute to the quality and timing of patient-clinician discussions about live donor kidney transplantation as a treatment option. So you don't even have doctors talking to patients about, you don't have that discussion going on. So if you don't have that discussion, then how is someone supposed to know about finding a donor? You know? So I'm about to end the show on my YouTube and Facebook and talk a little bit on TikTok for a moment before I shut it all down. I want to thank everyone for watching the show. Especially would have liked to have more comments on the YouTube and Facebook on individuals, because I know there's plenty of people who are on the transplant list and been on there for a while and may have seen other people get transplant much faster, and they're saying, like, what is going on? So I just shared with you some of the things that's going on. There's a disparity in finding living donors for African Americans. So, and a lot of other things that center around that. So, I see you guys on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening. Stay blessed and encouraged. If you are looking for a kidney donor, keep searching. It's coming. Okay? Whether it's deceased or alive, if it works for you, it works for you. Okay? Stay blessed and encouraged. I'm out.
Warriors around, don't get caught in the mosh pit. Fuel to the fire, ain't nobody can stop it. Trouble in my city, but you know I'm across it. Got a 40 on my hip and I'm liable to spark it. Throw down these hits, my click is indivisible. I aim, you duck, I squeeze, now you invisible. I'm not afraid of getting physical. All these different chemicals are fogging up my visuals. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Yo, we notorious, we ain't no runners. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Yo, we some warriors, they ain't called gunners. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Bloods on my hands, got slugs on my gunners. Put on my sweat, put on the beat, put on the map, put on my team. Take out every motherfucker in between. Know what I mean? Better myself, better my aim, better my rap, better my name. Killing rappers on my hang, I'm running chains for the fame. Never thought I would, and now I'm running.